In 1887, 300 of France's greatest artists, architects, and writers signed a petition demanding that the construction be stopped. They called it a disgrace, a blot on the city, a hollow candlestick, an iron carcass, a gigantic black factory chimney, a barbarous mass overwhelming and humiliating all of the monuments of Paris. They were describing the Eiffel Tower, the building that would go on to become the most visited paid monument in the history of the world. Over 300 million visitors since it opened, more than the Colosseum, Machu Picchu, and the Taj Mahal combined. The petition did not stop construction. Nothing stopped construction, because the man building the tower had already thought of everything that would have stopped anyone else. His name was Gustave Eiffel. He was 54 years old when construction began. His firm had already built the internal iron skeleton of the Statue of Liberty and hundreds of railway bridges across France and Portugal. He understood iron the way other men understood stone, and the Eiffel Tower was not originally supposed to be permanent. It was built for the 1889 World's Fair in Paris, the Exposition Universelle, held to celebrate the centenary of the French Revolution. The tower was designed as a temporary structure to stand for 20 years and then be dismantled. The city of Paris had explicitly reserved the right to tear it down. Eiffel knew this. He designed it to survive anyway. The tower used an entirely new construction method. Eiffel's firm produced 5,300 engineering drawings, covering every component before a single piece of iron was cut. Instead of stone, which required continuous formwork and support, he used prefabricated iron components, calculated to such precision that every single piece could be measured, cut, and drilled at the Eiffel workshops at Levallois-Perret before being brought to the construction site. The 18,038 individual iron components arrived on site, ready to assemble. The tolerance on every hole was less than 1/10 of a millimeter. In 1887, without computers, without laser cutting, working only with technical drawings and skilled machinists, the Eiffel team achieved a precision that modern manufacturers still find remarkable. The on-site workers did not cut or drill anything. They bolted and riveted parts that had already been finished. This was an extraordinary revolution in construction. It meant errors could be caught in the factory, not on the scaffold. It meant construction could proceed at a speed that stone construction could not approach. 300 men worked on site at any given time, 132 on the structural assembly. At the height of construction, they were adding 1 floor per week. The tower rose 300 meters in 26 months, from January 1887 to March 1889. No worker died in the structural assembly. This last point bears emphasis. At the height of the Industrial Revolution, construction was a killing field. The building of the Brooklyn Bridge killed 27 workers. The construction of the original Hoover Dam killed 112. The Eiffel Tower's structural assembly killed no one. Eiffel had designed the safety systems with the same precision he applied to the engineering. The public hated it, and then they didn't. When the World's Fair opened in May 1889, 2 million people visited in the first month. By the end of the fair, nearly 2 million more had climbed the tower itself. They queued for hours in the summer heat of Paris to stand at 276 meters above the city and see something that no person had ever seen before: Paris from the sky. The gate receipts, the ticket sales, exceeded the entire cost of construction. The tower paid for itself before the fair was over. The artists and writers who had signed the petition quietly stopped mentioning it. Some of them became enthusiastic supporters. Guy de Maupassant, who had been particularly savage in his criticism, reportedly ate lunch in the tower's restaurant almost daily. When asked why, given how much he hated it, he said, "It is the only place in Paris from which you cannot see it." The agreement with the city gave the tower 20 years. After that, it was supposed to come down. Eiffel made sure it wouldn't. He had anticipated this from the beginning. He designed the top of the tower to serve as a scientific platform. Meteorology, atmospheric physics, wind studies, a flagpole for military signal operations, and, crucially, in 1898, a wireless telegraph antenna. When the city council met to discuss demolition as the 20-year deadline approached, they faced an argument they could not counter. The tower was now essential military infrastructure. In 1899, it was used for military radio communications during the Dreyfus Affair. In 1903, it was transmitting time signals that synchronized clocks across France. In 1914, the tower's wireless transmitter intercepted German military communications at the Battle of the Marne and transmitted orders to the Paris garrison that turned a German advance into a retreat. The tower had done something that no petition could undo. It had made itself useful, and then indispensable. The city that wanted to tear it down found itself defending it as a national asset. The engineering of the tower itself was extraordinary in ways that were not visible. The pressure the tower exerts on its four foundations is approximately 4.5 kilograms per square centimeter, roughly the same pressure as a person sitting in a chair. For a 10,000-ton iron structure, this represents a distribution of force that had never been achieved before. The tower sways in the wind by up to 12 centimeters. It was designed to do this. The movement prevents the kind of stress concentrations that would destroy a rigid structure. On hot summer days, the tower grows by up to 15 centimeters as the iron expands with heat. It was designed to account for this too. The exact calculations for thermal expansion were part of Eiffel's original engineering documents. The monument that was denounced as barbarous was in fact the most precisely engineered structure that had ever been built. By the time the 20-year demolition deadline arrived in 1909, no one was seriously proposing to use it. The tower had been renewed indefinitely. It has been renewed ever since. Every 7 years, approximately 60 tons of paint are applied to protect the iron from rust. The entire tower is repainted by hand. 18 different shades of paint, darker at the base, lighter at the top, create the visual impression of a uniform color. The 300 artists and writers who tried to stop it in 1887 created what is probably the most famous petition in the history of architecture. What they actually created was the publicity campaign that made the tower famous before it was even finished. The controversy proved the tower was significant. The controversy gave Paris a reason to care what happened. The controversy, in a way, helped save it. The city that tried to destroy the Eiffel Tower failed not because it lacked the power to act. It failed because one engineer had thought further ahead than the city knew how to argue. Gustave Eiffel died in 1923, aged 91. He had lived long enough to see his temporary structure become the permanent symbol of France. He had lived long enough to see the men who called it a factory chimney become the men who put it on postcards. He reportedly said near the end of his life that he should thank his critics.
If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more hidden stories from history. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.